People that have woken up in bed with a stranger. What's your story? My roommate had a party. I woke up in the morning and there was a girl who had drunkenly snuck into my bed and fallen asleep. We woke up at pretty much the same time in the early AM, both very confused. We talked for a minute and she insisted on taking a bathroom break, borrowing some PJs, and snuggling back to sleep for a while. It somehow just felt like the natural thing to do. We ended up dating for a while and the joke was that we had slept together before we met. At my brother and sister-in-law's in Brunswick, Georgia, CL had been subtly flirty with me all night. We all were completely shit-faced on red wine, and my wife passed out on the sofa. I staggered off to bed. I awoke in the wee hours with a large warm body fully pressed up against my back. I was immediately terrified it was CL, and I was going to have to either make a scene or have some serious splaining to do. Turns out it was BL's Rottweiler. I went back to sleep. Day after a rush party I woke up to an alarm that wasn't mine. Heard a voice to my left say it's 6, got to go to work, reached over and handed her the phone and pretended to go back to bed. She was putting her shoes on by the dorm door and said AWW thank you. Opened my eyes and apparently after BL out and doing the deed I put a water bottle and granola bar in her shoe for work. Dunno what happened there. Was in college. Went out too hard on a Thursday night because I had no class the next day. Woke up in my own room to a girl standing there getting dressed. I was dumbfounded. She super casually put on her jacket, said I have to get to class, and left before I could even get a word out. I never saw her again. Tried to ask friends who I came home with. Everyone said I just disappeared. Her face is burned into my mind and now, 5 years later, I have no clue what happened or who I spent the night with. Lots of R&W at a party in a friend's place. I remember at some point I told people I needed to sleep and went to an empty room. The last thing I remember is this girl coming to bed and we started discussing the world's problems. I don't remember any other thing. The weirdest part was morning. We woke up, saw that we were both naked. Awesome. I told her I don't remember anything from the night, not even her name. We have a proper introduction. Have us again because why not? Have breakfast outside, then share a taxi home. We were living close and never saw each other again. I guess it felt weird for both of us. When I had my son, I couldn't sleep. I told my doctor I hadn't slept a full night in 13 months. Most nights I was getting only an hour or two, and I couldn't sleep during the day. I'd try to nap, but I'd just stare at the ceiling. My doctor prescribed me Ambien. The first night I took it and went to bed. Sometime during the night, my husband brought the baby into our bed. I woke up to find a baby covered in rainbows and tiny little gnomes. Me, honey, wake up. There's a baby in our bed. Husband, I know. You're going to wake him up. Me, do his parents know he's here? Husband, his dad does. Go to sleep. Not woke up with one, but came home from primary school around 11 years of age to find a complete stranger in my bed. Being completely naive thinking he was a family friend, I made us both sandwiches to give to him. I returned to my room to find him gone. I now look back at this with complete horror. My family finds it amusing that it took me years to tell my family about it. I know a guy who went home with a stranger, went pee in the middle of the night naked, went back to bed, woke up to screaming. He had gone back to the wrong room and was naked in her mother's bed. Deleted. Not exactly the answer to the question, but my dad told me something scary after his stroke. Because he couldn't feel one side of his body, he would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and think a stranger had broken in and was laying next to him. He would have to calm down and remember that he'd had a major stroke and didn't immediately realize that the person he thought was laying next to him was he himself. I was in college staying near campus and decided to go to a frat party. I decided to walk home before the liquor kicked in too much. By the time I got home I was BL out. I barely made it. Got to my bed and passed out. Didn't even take my shoes off lol. I woke up off and on throughout the night feeling some person next to me. I figured it was a girl I had been dating. She'd come over if she got scared at night or some to sleep at my place. I never thought much of it. She cuddled me that night and it felt amazing. Guys love being the little spoon sometimes. The sun woke me up, and I decided to go pee. I remember having to step over her to get out the bed, losing my balance cause I was still drunk. I go pee, come back, and notice this is not the girl I'm dating. Also she's in bra panties. F. I then notice I only have boxers on. Don't remember getting undressed. My clothes are folded on my computer chair next to a half-eaten grilled cheese. I immediately go to my roommate's room to ask who TF she is. He's in bed with his girl. I woke him up, and he said the girl claimed she knew me. I was afraid. I go back to the living area until she wakes up. Apparently she didn't have a ride home, and since she stayed far I drunkenly offered her a place to crash. She helped me walk home, unlocked the door for me cause I was out of it, undressed me, and folded my clothes. Then she made me grilled cheese cause I was drunkenly begging for one. I ate half of it and laid down. Initially she was on the couch, but said I was calling to her loudly like a banshee lol. She cuddled me until I feel asleep, then she feel asleep lol. I was embarrassed and thankful. She took care of me lol. I took her home, and we laughed about it. We stayed friends for a long time. Hung out more than a few times. We were never more than friend, because I was already dating someone. Sometimes I wonder if she was the one for me. IDK how we lost touch. I don't even like grilled cheese. Was a ref in my mid-20s and fell asleep in a 60+ man's hotel bed after a night of drinking in restaurant across from said hotel. What could have been a recipe for disaster turned into him saying back quote, "If I ever had a daughter I hope she'd be just like you. I called ya a cab and here's your wallet. Be safe now." Probably not what you imagined. As a kid, I would sleepwalk at night. In the morning, I would have no recollection of what happened. I spent the night at a friend's house when I was about 10, and the family had a fire going in the fireplace in their living room. My friend's mom decided to sleep on the couch to make sure the fire went out, and the dad went to sleep in the parents' bedroom. Due to the door to their bedroom always being closed, I had never been inside. Which was very disorienting the next morning when I awoke in said bedroom as the dad was just waking up and getting out of his bed. He had assumed during the night I was his son and didn't question anything when I slipped into bed with him. Kudos to dad for not making it any more awkward than it already was. And that's the story of how I awoke next to my friend's dad. I was in Munich for Oktoberfest. Accommodation is really fucking expensive and in high demand, so I had my first night booked in a sleeping bag in a big communal tent. But for my subsequent nights I had gotten a bunk in a hostel dorm. My accommodation for that night was a rented air mattress and sleeping bag in tent with 7 other people. I'd arrived in Munich late in the evening, and I didn't get to do much before bed. The campsite was pretty far from the festivities, so my plan was to just spend the night in the campsite, then check out first thing, and get over to my hostel in the city center for the real fun to begin next day. The guy occupying the airbed next to me, by contrast, had clearly had a very crazy day, and was about to give me a very crazy night. I'd spoken to him briefly when I arrived, or rather I tried to. I'm English and don't speak any French, while he was French and didn't speak any English. So we didn't have much to say to one another before I turned in for an early night to be ready for a big day tomorrow, and he went off to continue drinking. 1 AM. I'm fast asleep, snuggled into my sleeping bag, when I'm awakened by a violent tugging and struggling. I'm yanked bodily off my air mattress and onto the one next to me. Half asleep, confused, and frightened I realize that I'm now laying atop a complete bollocks naked French man. He's grabbing and pulling at my sleeping bag, still tightly wrapped around me, and he seems absolutely confused and uncomprehending of the fact that it's fucking occupied. Dazed and confused I scramble off his naked form and struggle back onto my own mattress. I'm staring in absolute confusion at him. "What the fuck?" I whisper. His eyes, however, pare right through me, unseeing, unfocused. He's staring into some faraway place, seeking to understand why the sleeping bag has apparently crawled away on its own. Then he promptly pare out onto his bed, snoring within seconds, and still presenting his wedding tackle for all the world to admire. Well, WTF was I to do? So I rolled over and went back to sleep. For 30 minutes. 1:30 am I'm dragged from my bed a second time. The guy was pretty strong and pulled me across him once again. Get the F off me, I demand in a stage whisper. I really don't want anyone else to wake up and find me entangled with him like this. He's tugging insistently at my sleeping bag, and this time I'm awake enough to realize what's going on. His sleeping bag has disappeared off to the same dimension as his clothes. It's the early hours of a brisk September morning and he's cold and trying to cover up. He thinks his duvet has slipped off and is too drunk to figure out why the duvet is fighting back and s at him in English. This time, after once again making my escape back to my own bed, I sit up and look around trying to locate his sleeping bag or clothes. I figure that if I find them for him then he'll leave me alone. They are nowhere in sight. I have no idea where the bag has gone, nor the clothes he was presumably wearing before coming to bed. His only possession that I can see is his backpack, which I wasn't going to go rummaging through. Before I can decide what to do, his snores roll once again across the tent. He's passed out again. Alright, I think. Surely it can't happen a third time. I thought wrong. Grab, drag, swear, struggle. No, you French fuck. This is my sleeping bag. Mine. Get off me. But this time was different. His eyes could focus on me. He'd sobered up enough to realize that the sentient struggling duvet was actually an irate Englishman. He stared at me, bewilderment rolling around behind his eyes, and this time he spoke to me in French. I don't understand French, but even if I did I'd bet money he didn't say anything intelligible. We engaged in a brief, but heated argument that went nowhere. He was clearly very cold and shivering now. I watched him scramble around looking for his actual sleeping bag. I tried to talk to him, but he didn't seem to hear me. Then grabbed his backpack, pulled out a heavy coat, put it on, and collapsed back onto the bed, already asleep again. I waited a little while, this time, keeping an eye out, but eventually I fell asleep and slept undisturbed until I awoke to the light of the morning and the commotion of the tent's other occupants beginning their day. Frenchie was still sound asleep, still face down snoring into his mattress, still wearing his coat, and still presenting his fully naked to the world. We all politely ignored him, but after I dressed up did cover him with the sleeping bag that he'd fought so hard for during the night. Got really drunk at a dorm party. Ended up carrying a passed out girl up to her room 3 flights of stairs. Elevator was out. Plunked her in her bed, took her shoes off, then passed out on her floor. She woke me up by stepping on me and yelling at me. I was too hungover to argue and just left. I drank a lot and did Xanax, so I barely remembered the night before. I woke up naked in a bed. There was another guy in the bed. I presumed he was naked too because he didn't have a shirt on and the blanket covered everything below. I just got up and got dressed and left. The guy didn't even get up. I didn't want to wake him up. I was extremely confused and just figured that I fucked the guy. I had never been into men and never done anything with a guy. I was honestly freaked out. 3 days later, I get a call, and it's apparently the guy, saying I left my headphones there, and that he wanted to know I got home okay. He said I dropped them on the ground when I took my clothes off in the middle of the night. I was like, what do you mean, the middle of the night? He apparently offered me a place to sleep because I was too drunk to get on the subway and I was fully clothed, but sometime in the middle of the night I got up and drank 2 shots of liquor and then took all of my clothes off and danced in his room and asked that he record me dancing, then passed out in the bed. I became friends with him and he sent me the video of me dancing naked in his room and I still have that video today.